Hello. Welcome to video 2 of Cookiecutter Django on the Really Coding channel. My name is Jay, and we are about to initialize the first Cookiecutter project for this series, Cookiecutter Django project. Let me get into it. So let me pull up the screen here. There we go. Move me over to the right. All right. So we're going to initialize the project. It's going to tell us how to do that here. Just to walk through it real quick, you will need Cookiecutter installed, so you can do pip install Cookiecutter. 1.7 is the should be a good version, right? I mean, they just updated this repo, so that should be good. Yeah. So if you do pip install Cookiecutter, and the links to this repo are in the description, so you're welcome to go down there, click on it, open up, follow along with me, or just go read the docs yourself. Totally fine. I will be initializing this in just a minute, and then we'll get into the actual guts of it, the actual development process and all of that. So we're gonna pip install Cookiecutter, which I already have, and then we're gonna run Cookiecutter on this repo, and that's going to start initializing the project. Whenever we get to that point, which, by the way, if I haven't already covered this, Daniel Greenfield is the creator of this template, of this project template. And I mean, this project template is in my opinion, it's a very big deal. It's very nicely done. It's very full. You can find lots of templates that do little things. This one does everything. So he did a great job. He's got a lot of contributors on this repo. It's a very popular repo. Highly recommend checking it out, and dropping a like or star or whatever you do on GitHub to let them know you appreciate it. It's going to ask for the project slug, which, as I covered in the last video, will plant it all across the project where this Cookiecutter project slug is, and that's essentially the same as starting a project in with Django and then giving it a name. It does the same thing, but it spreads that name out throughout the entire project build. So we have the project name, project slug. We have a description that you can give it. I usually just leave this at the default. You can find it in the settings later. Author name, you want to change that from Daniel Greenfield. Your domain name, you can leave it example.com for now. If you already have a URL and you're planning on deploying this application, you might go ahead and use that, because you are going to have to crawl through some files to find that URL later, mainly in the compose file for production, and in your settings and your environment variables, most likely. It's going to ask you for an email, which you can just give it a whatever at email.com. That's totally fine. If you want to do that, you can give it a real email. It's totally fine. Give it a version name. It's going to ask you for an open source license. I always go with just not open source in most cases. Sometimes I'll do MIT. I typically don't launch things. I do a lot more playing around than I do launching stuff, so it doesn't really matter. I've got so many projects that will never see the light of day that are marked not open source, because they're never going to see the light of day. It doesn't matter. I could have marked them anything. Just choose accordingly. You can always change your licensing later. It's not a big deal. Just don't get hung up on that. When it comes to select username type, this is for logging in. So do you want your users to log in with username or email? This is something else that's actually controlled by Django All-Auth. It's in your settings. You can totally change this later as well. I look at it like this. It's a lot easier to type in my username than it is to type in my username and then at email.com to log in. And when I'm logging in and out and all that stuff a lot, it's just easier to use your username. So it's a personal choice. If you want to go with the email, go with the email. Otherwise, go with username. Time zone. Time zone. I always choose the default UTC. You can choose your own time zone. You have to type it in like this to make that choice. I just go with the default, and then whatever time zone calculations are necessary for the user for displaying times or dates or whatever. It's that logic's going to be required regardless. I actually am not entirely sure, and this might be a point of ignorance on my part, why we don't just use the regular UTC, but whatever. That's up to you and how you want to go about it. I would go with I would just go with the default myself. I do go with the default myself. I can say that it works just fine. I am going to be using a Windows computer. If you're not, you'll probably hit no there. I'm going to be using VS Code, so if you're not, you probably, I don't know too many people that even use PyCharm that aren't doing data science. So it's up to you. If you're using PyCharm, if you're using Vim or NeoVim or whatever, go with one. use Docker. I will be using Docker in these tutorials, just for the record. This is a Cookiecutter Django series of tutorials. But for me, when it comes to Cookiecutter Django, Docker's, I mean, that's really the reason why I use Cookiecutter Django. So it's you can use the local development server for that if you want to, and I might cover that. But definitely, this will be a Docker tutorial as well as Django and all of the other things that are involved with this. All right, so select Postgres version. I go with the latest, which is 16 right now. Cloud providers, you can do AWS or none, and I'm not. This is Google Cloud Provider. I don't use Google Cloud Provider. I use AWS. I'm thinking about switching to none and just hosting everything locally like I used to, because honestly, AWS is a bit of a pain in the ass. Pardon my language. All right, so moving on. The select mail service, I go with SendGrid myself, and it's really going to boil down to which one do you want to sign up for, which one you already signed up for, which one. But whichever one you choose, it's going to go ahead and gracefully set up the send email environment. So whenever a user signs up for your application, it sends you a verification email, and whenever you're working locally, it'll show up in MailPit. Whenever you're working, whenever it's in production, it should show up in their email, right? It's all gracefully, intuitively built into Cookiecutter Django's project template to be set up correctly with all of these providers. I've only ever used SendGrid, so I can't really speak to the other ones working, but they're there. I'd have to imagine they work just as well as SendGrid works. But with SendGrid, it just has a couple of lines for your API key, and I think there's another one we'll look at that you would go to SendGrid and grab your API key and everything and put it in, and then at that point when you deploy, the emails just work. They just work. Even if you're sending emails from your app for other various things, or if it's a user system email, it doesn't matter. It'll work. Use async. So this is what causes the project. Whenever you make changes to your code base, it's going to cause it to allow you to refresh without having to start Docker or rebuild the project or whatever. I mean, it's kind of a mess if you don't use it. There's going to be several instances where you're going to make a change and then you're going to have to stop Docker and then restart it. If you use async, it'll go ahead and persist. It'll push those changes along, and then whenever you refresh, the changes will be there. So it's a definite yes in like every case I've ever used this package for. Use async has always been a yes. There's been a couple of times. There's one time in particular where I built an entire application without using async because I didn't know what async was, and it was a nightmare. It was one of the biggest pains in my butt that I've ever experienced. So, choose accordingly. I would definitely go yes with async myself. Use DRF, that's Django REST Framework. Django REST Framework, of course, is for deving out API endpoints and building an API, basically. I don't normally include DRF because I'm not building it. I don't build a lot of APIs. I don't even know how to say them. So if you're into that, then I would go yes, but you also have to think in terms of like how big is your project, how much of it's going to have to run, how good is your computer for local development. If you don't need it, I wouldn't do it, but if you just want to see what it looks like and how it's set up, because you can learn a lot just from initializing this project and going and picking through the source code of the project and seeing how they do it. It's an immaculate build of Django. It's amazing. So, whatever you want to do there, if you want to use DRF, use it. If not, not. I won't be on this round. Select front end pipeline. I don't use any of these pipelines. I go with none myself, and I'm actually just getting into HTMX for front end, for progressive front end functionality. And I personally don't use the front end pipelines. So it's up to you. You don't have to, and if you do, you should probably know how to. I think that's one of the biggest problems that you can run into is where you try something that you don't know how to do and then it doesn't work right, and then the whole project's ruined because of it. So be careful there. If you want to use Webpack or Gulp, go for it. I used to use Gulp for something back in the day. I can't even remember now. I just remember using it. But anyways, yeah, if you choose your front end pipeline there, use Celery. So Celery's for background tasks. The way I'm actually working on a project with that right now where it's a page scanner application. So you put in your URL, you submit the form, HTMX sends it to a view on the Django end that fires off a long running task, a function, And if I didn't have celery, then if the page couldn't reload without ruining the operation, you'd be stuck, right? So it could take 2 to 3 minutes for it to finish, and if the page itself gets interrupted, it breaks the process. So with celery, what happens is I have the task set up as a celery task. That view triggers that celery task, and then it doesn't matter at that point what the user does. They can close the browser, go to a different page, whatever. That task is still running in the background on the server. It's agnostic of any user interaction at that point. It's going to run until it's finished. Now, one of the things I did do, which I might be able to get into at some point in a tutorial, not this series, was I set up a loading bar with HTMX. So HTMX sends the request to the view to start the long running task, then it responds back with the loading bar and the initial percentage of completion, which is 0, and then it starts polling another view for the progress, and celery progress, which is a package that complements celery, gives the progress to the front end, and I'm just delivering HTML because that's how HTMX works. So you don't have to use JSON anymore. It's pretty beautiful. But that gives me a loading bar on the page for that task. So if the task takes 10 minutes, if the user closes their browser and comes back to check on it, that's still going to have the same, whatever the progress is on that task, that's what the bar is going to show, which is really cool. If they, anything, they can then go to another page and come back, and that if the task isn't done, but when the task is done, then it will show whatever is required, to show based on the completion of the task. So if you don't understand background tasks, you might want to not mess with celery right now because it's a little heavy and it's going to run in its own container. Flour, celery beet, all of these things will end up running in Docker containers. So if you're not familiar with background tasks, if you don't want to work on that right now, if you don't need that, then I would go ahead and say no to celery. Or if you want to see just the full power of this thing, hit yes, and you'll quickly see I don't know, just how cool it is. There's lots of pretty colors in the terminal when this thing's running. All right, so use Melpit. I say yes. Now, I don't know what you would do without Melpit, but with Melpit, you get at your local development IP address at 0825, you get a local email, what do you call that? User interface, application, whatever. When you're sending emails locally, all of the emails end up in the same inbox at that port. So you can go in, when you register as a new user, even if you create a super user, you're going to have to verify your email, right? So it's going to send it somewhere, but when you're in local development, it sends it to Melpit. Or Melpit finds it from wherever it does send it to. But you go to Melpit and you can open it up and you can click on that verification link and it will send you back to your port 8000 where your app is, and it'll say, okay, you verified. So Melpit is really great. I love it. I've built a lot of user interaction emails, a lot of marketing emails and stuff in some apps, and Melpit's great for receiving those and letting you check out the templates and whatnot. And I say I highly recommend it, but you should have it. You should say yes to Melpit. Use Sentry. So Sentry is it's an application for monitoring errors on your production server. So whenever you get a 500 error or something breaks or doesn't work right on your website, for your user, it's not going to show your typical Django error page where it gives all the information about the app and where things are and URLs and etc. Right? It's not going to show that to the user because the user doesn't need to see that. That's for you. But where do you see that? Well, you can dump your logs. But Sentry, Sentry will send you emails and hey, you had an error, and then you go into Sentry and you find out what it is, and you just work your way back through the app and deploy the latest version, and hopefully you don't have that error again. So Sentry is really great for that. If you don't plan on deploying, if you have your own error handling managed and you don't want to worry about that, or whatever, if you do plan on deploying it, it's not a lot of steps to install it directly into your project after the fact, but I would just. It doesn't need to run locally. It doesn't run locally. It doesn't take up any resources, so I wouldn't worry about it. I would just hit yes. And then if you never put in your Sentry API keys, no one's going to care. So it's fine. Use white noise. White noise is for delivering static files. I just hit yes here. It's really that simple. It's just for just quicker static access. Use Heroku. I say no because I'm not using Heroku. Select CI tools. I say GitHub because I use GitHub for deployment. keep local envs in VCs. Okay, so this is keep your local environment variables in your repo. And if you think about what your local environment variables are, they're your API keys, they're your app secrets, they're all the things, right? All the things that you don't want people to find. Probably shouldn't put them in your repo, even if it's not public. So, whereas you can, it's not, it's to each their own, I guess. Just consider that, and then think: do I want? Now, if you don't include them into the repo, and you go to deploy, if you move your app anywhere or whatever, you want to share your app with somebody, you're going to have to give them the environment variables. You're going to have to give them the folder with your environment variables in it. You're gonna have to deploy those. I use FileZilla. You can use rsync through Bash to transfer the folder over to your project folder. But regardless, when you pull onto your server, your repo, and your environment variables aren't in there, you're then gonna have to find a way to put your environment variables into the repo on the server. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated. I still feel like it's more secure than keeping them in your repo, but you can just hit yes here if you don't care, or if you have other plans, or if you know better than me. It's totally fine. Now, debug. Here's the thing about debug. If everybody should know Django, the debug tool at this point, if you've used Django at all. And if you haven't, you probably shouldn't be here. You should probably go learn a little bit about how Django works before you get into learn to drive a go-kart before you get in a race car. But debug is a really useful tool. It can sometimes be a pain in the ass and get in your way whenever you're trying to do stuff. But the thing about it is, from what I can tell, and it's been this way for years, I've never once hit no on debug and not had debug available. It's always there. So it's yes or no, but I can't remember the exact instance, but in my opinion, just from what I remember, yes is better than no, because no, you're still going to get it, but it's kind of buggy. And then yes, you're going to have it, but it's installed correctly and everything's fine. So I would just hit yes there. And if that changes in future versions where you can hit no and not have debug, sometimes I would not like to have the little, DJT thing on the side of the screen. I zoom in a lot for streams, and it can get in the way. And I've used it. Rarely do I ever use the debug tool, honestly. So these days, I used to use it a lot. It's a great tool. If you're new to Django, you should absolutely at least give it a shot, see what it does, look at it. It's nice. All right, so those are all of the things we're about to fill out. Let me go ahead and get into that. In order to get this going, first you are going to need to pip install Cookiecutter. We already talked about that right here. It's going to be in the docs. The link's in the description below. We're going to take the link here. Okay, let's go into a new folder. Oh, that's not the one. I am trying to do this series in one take today. Let's see how that goes. Sorry about this. I should have had a folder ready and I didn't. Let's go in here and we'll say new folder. Cookiecutter Django. Alright, so I have a folder here. Now, you can do this in any terminal. I'll go ahead and open up VS Code. I was going to do it in Bash, but there's no point, I guess, because I'm going to be opening VS Code anyways. So open up a new terminal here. I already have Cookiecutter installed, so I'll go ahead and use that. I have it installed locally. If you don't like, there's certain Python packages that I just have installed on my computer. Very rarely do I just install a Python package on my computer without using a virtual environment, but things like Cookiecutter and of course virtual env, that creates virtual environments. There's a couple of things that you have to just have installed locally. Cookiecutter is great for that. I don't want a virtual environment just to go, just to run Cookiecutter. You can have that if you've got a folder where it's like, this is my Cookiecutter initializing virtual environment, and you can spin that up and run Cookiecutter. It's to each their own. It's totally fine. Me personally, I'm not using a virtual environment for this. I just say Cookiecutter from my global packages, paste the GitHub repo link, hit enter. Now it's asking me, do I want to re-download it? I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. I say yes every time. I don't, there's always a new version. Sometimes it trips you up because they do some stuff in there that's like, whoa, okay, I wasn't ready for that. Don't know what that means. So, tread lightly, tread carefully on this. We'll call this Cookiecutter. And, it's funny. This is Django Cookiecutter Django, meaning that it's a Django project from a Cookiecutter template. A lot of people call it Cookiecutter. It's like, nah, it's Cookiecutter Django, but whatever. It's shorthand. We'll call it CD. I don't know, but project name, I did lowercase Cookiecutter. I'll go ahead and keep that for the project slug. We'll keep behold my awesome project because it's a great tagline for the description. I'm going to change it to my username. We'll do example.com is totally fine. Sure, we'll use that email. Version 1's totally fine. 5 for not open source for me, myself, and personally. And I'll say 1 for username. I'm going to do the default UTC. I am using Windows. I am using VS Code. I am going to use Docker. Highly recommend it. 1 for Postgres 16. Please select one of the one. You know what? Let's. I'll show you 1. We'll use 6 for SendGrid, even though we don't plan on launching this. I'm going to say yes for async, no for DRF. Not interested in getting into that right now. I'm going to say 1 for none for the front end. Yeah, I might go into Celery a little bit in this, so I'm going to say yes. Yes to Mailpit. Yes to Sentry, even though, again, it's not that big of a deal. Yes to White Noise. No to Heroku. 4 for GitHub. What is Drone? They added a new option there. Keep your local IMs in VSCs. I'm going to say no. I don't feel comfortable saying yes, even on a test project for some reason. It's been beaten into me, but now it is, as you can see on the side here, it's built this project. And when we open it, I don't think I can zoom into my files. Doesn't seem like it, but this is what came out of it. Pretty decent chunk of code. It's the same exact thing that's here. I guess for the most part. It doesn't have like the hooks and all that. But so this is the project pre-initialized with the Cookiecutter slugs and all the Cookiecutter resources and assets and requirements, whatever. This is what comes out of it. As you can see, I should have named it something different, but because it's called Cookiecutter. But this is the project name. This is where that slug, the project slug goes, and this is everything that comes inside of it. This is your app folder, which whatever you name the project. See if I can zoom in here with the. Yeah, we can do this for now. All right, sorry about that. I want to make sure that it's visible. So this is the main folder that got generated where it says Cookiecutter. Inside of it, we have a dev container. We have our invs, our environment variables for local and production. Inside of there, we have Django and Postgres. You can see that Postgres has our Postgres information for our Postgres container, which we'll look at in just a second. And inside of production, same thing. We have all of our, and I'm never going to launch this, so feel free to look at my secret keys and whatnot. But you can see here that this is where everything related to what we just set up is stored. We have our Sentry DSN. We have Redis URL, Celery settings for Flower, and I don't see anything for Beaten here. Django AWS, SendGrid. This can stay blank in most cases. Your allowed host, your app name, your admin URL for production. So when you're in production, it generates a random admin. Where when you're locally, you just go /admin. So that's those are your environment variables right there. And I'm sorry, I'm realizing that the screen's cut off because of how small these files are. The file names are. I might see if I can figure out a way to increase them. Those are the environment variables. GitHub, this is just for your CI/CD. Your compose files, which we'll get into a little bit later. I don't want to make it be too confusing. So this is structured a slightly differently than your default Django application or any tutorial you've ever watched, I guarantee you. For instance, in most cases, your settings file is generally one file, not multiple files, right? Not production, local, and base. You get production, local, and base in these files. Right there, right? Also, your settings file is in your main app folder. That's not the case with this. In this generation in this project, you have a config folder that has your settings. It has your ASGI if you ever decide to go with WebSockets. It has your Celery settings, which typically don't have to be messed with. They're set up perfectly. It has your main URLs file, just again like your main app normally would in your Django project. All completely set up for you. You don't have to write any of this. It doesn't have that big giant chunk of starter comment up at the top. You have your WebSockets, your WebSocket settings, and your WSGI settings, which is what basically you're using with a static application that's not using WebSockets. So it's got all those things in this config file. So it goes your main project folder, config, and it's very important because you'll be going that route a lot. You'll be going to the anytime you need to add a new app, you'll need to go to your base.py settings folder down here, and you can see that the settings are way better, way more filled out, way more professional looking, way more commented than your typical Django application. Just out the gate, boom. It looks like I'm a 10xer. I'm not. I'm barely a 0.5xer, but look at me. I've got all of this set up perfectly already. Beyond that, then you have some local settings that are just for running your project locally. I apologize, my allergies are getting a little nuts. And then you have your production settings, which you almost typically never have to get into these. You see the AWS. You see how it comes from the IMS. So a lot of these settings are going to come for your environment variables. So, you might have to come in here occasionally and change some things here and there, but not for the most part. All right. Okay, so yeah, it's the 2 points of importance. You have your environment variables, and then you have your config folder. Those are two things that you'll probably have to mess with a little bit. Maybe not so much the environment variables, but definitely the config file. You'll be headed, or the folder you'll be headed here a lot. The settings folder. Beyond that, again, I should have named this something different than Cookiecutter, but just as long as you understand that in the context moving forward, Cookiecutter is going to refer to this project. I should have named it test or literally anything other than Cookiecutter. I could have named it Django Cookiecutter. I could have named it Cookiecutter Django. I named it Cookiecutter. Now I feel confused. Hopefully you're not confused. Just so you know, the project's called Cookiecutter. That's the main folder. Anytime you generate a Cookiecutter Django project, the main folder is going to be called whatever you name it. The apps folder is going to be called that as well. So inside the Cookiecutter folder, we have the IMS folder, we have the config folder, and we have the apps folder, which in this case is called Cookiecutter. Inside of the apps folder, we have this contrib folder. We have our static folder, so we have our CSS, our fonts, our images, our JavaScript, and we have our templates folder. So another small difference with a lot of Django tutorials is they teach you to put your templates and your static files within an application. So every app within your project, for one, your apps are not inside of an app folder. It goes your project and then all of your apps. And then inside of your app folders, each one typically has a template folder and a static folder. And that's like, to me, that's very beginnerish. It's especially using this, I feel very sophisticated. And you can go in when you know how to mess with the templates and mess with your static URL and whatever. You can go in and fix it yourself if you want to. This is already set up to put everything into a global folder. So instead of putting everything in a template folder inside of your app folder, you would just use the templates folder inside of your apps folder and the static folder, and you would reference them. Inside of the templates folder, we have an account folder. This is for Django All-Auth. We have an All-Auth folder also for Django All-Auth, but the All-Auth level is this entrance and manage. These extend base.html, and then your accounts templates, which this is the only one we have, it extends the base manage.html, which extends base.html, if that makes sense. So that's a pretty recent update from what I can tell in regards to All-Auth, even here in the last 6 months, where they've kind of changed their templating, their templates and the way they do things. They made them a little more sophisticated. So I'm actually still getting used to this myself, but it's no longer, it used to just be your login and your register and your sign out pages all extended base.html, and you could override them pretty easily. You can still override them pretty easily, but there's just one more layer, and I kind of like it because there's less you have to override to get the overall style fixed. If you want to fix something or change your framework or whatever, you can actually just change, instead of going through and changing every single one of those files, you can change just the base manager, and so that's pretty great. But those are your those are all auth templates, and all auth comes with these templates stock anyways. If you don't overwrite these things, then they come from the package. You don't have to worry about not having those templates at all. You just, when it comes to all auth, you don't want to try to change the way all auth works within the parameters that it allows, because you can change it to social login. You can change, or you can just use the default stuff. The settings for that, of course, are going to be in base.py in your settings file way at the bottom down here. All of these account settings, these are all auth settings. See how I chose username and the method is username. If I change this to email, then I have to use the email for the account to log in. That's basically it, in terms of that with all auth. But then over here we have the pages, which when you first init a project, this actually a buddy of mine was building something and he got caught up with this the other day. So this is actually a pretty good point. In the URLs py file that comes in the config folder, let me I want to look at the code. I want to show you the code, so I'm going to have to shrink this page down so you're not going to be able to see the files very well. I really got to look at how to make those more, make the file system a little more visible, but I think we can leave it like this. In the config folder, in your urls.py file, it comes with all of these default paths, right? So you have the accounts, which is Django all auth. You have the users, which is from this user folder, which I'll show you real quick down here in a minute. Sorry, I closed the apps folder. It's in the apps folder under users. It's an app in your folder that comes automatically with the build. Beyond that, you've got your admin URLs, of course. But beyond that, you have these default paths. One is to your home page. As you can tell, it's not extending a view. It's taking a template view as view, targeting the template. So you won't find a view anywhere for home. It's going directly to the template that's in the templates folder. The thing that caught my buddy up was he was trying to create a home view. He's doing it down here where it says your stuff, but he didn't see this. So he didn't see that even though he had a route going to back to root, that that it was being overwritten by the first instance of it, which was up here. So just keep that in mind. For one, you don't have to delete or go hunt down the views or anything like that. The templates are in the template folder. There's nothing in them. Under pages, home, empty, extends base, about, extends base. All right, so if you want to get rid of these and override them, you can just change them right here. You can just delete them. I would delete them and then come down here and put your stuff where it tells you to. But it's completely up to you and how you like to do it. And as long as you're not causing routing errors by using incorrect naming patterns or whatever, you should be totally fine. Let me think here. Okay, so that's just one point I wanted to point out with the templates. Okay, so in the user folder, this is the only app that comes with the project out of the gate, and it's pretty important because if we walk down it, we've got views. We have user details, and I'll spin this up in just a minute. We have user details. We have user update. We have user redirect. Okay, this user redirect, I will overwrite this once I have a dashboard or something built in a project to redirect users to. I will overwrite this from being the it goes to user detail, which is this right here, which is essentially a profile page. So I'll just come in here and overwrite this, and then anytime I want to redirect for the user for whatever reason, because they aren't supposed to go to a certain page or whatever, or when they log in and log out, I'll just overwrite this and I'll point to this route. Now you could just as easily go to another app and delete this and whatever you want to do. But this is pretty easy. Just so you know, like when you log in, this is what sends you to your profile page with the boilerplate project. Okay, so that's essentially the apps folder. We'll make an app here in a minute and put it in there because there's a caveat to installing a new application. Docs is Sphinx. However, you know what? Well, I'll have to look. There's a thing with the docs where they're not working right with these installs, and it's a recent thing, and I'm gonna have to look at and why. It might be a user error on my part. It might be a bad configuration with the project. with the template, I have no idea at the moment, but I have noticed that my documentation containers are not running, and I'm not able to access my documentation ports, and I'm getting an error with that. So it's not a big deal. It's not going to hold you up unless you need, that. But if you need your Sphinx documentation that bad, you probably know how to fix this. So feel free to fix it. Locale, I never use that. That's just languages and whatnot. Requirements. Okay, so here's one thing that is important to know about this system. Well, with using Docker, okay. I guess with using the system, because it's really the template. It's how the template works. The template is not just templating Django. It's templating all of the things that are accompanying this project, including and not limited to the Docker build of the containers. So one of the things that it does when it's spinning up the containers is it runs the requirement files to get all of the installs for the Python packages. You can go in to your containers, into your Django container, and pip install something if you want to. Really just put this is what the package comes with, base locally anyways, right? If you, or as a base. Now, if you end up needing, this is a couple things from local, pre-commit, DJ, the liners and all these things. And then in production, there's even less, it's just mail and storage stuff, right? Sentry, Psychop PG, Psycho PG, G Unicorn. Okay. But the base.tx file is where if you need it locally and you're gonna need it on the server, this is where I put most things. I mean, there's very rarely do I run into something where it's like, oh, I only need this locally, because everything that you would need is already installed, right? So let's say you need TextStat or any other one. Now you don't have to put the version number and a link to the repo or to the docs, right? But you don't have to. Now, if you don't put the version number, you better hope that the compatibility is there. But if you don't put the link to the repo, it's even less of a big deal, especially when you're just going to throw away project or whatever. But it is really nice to do this. So if you go to any of my older projects, most of them, I'd say about 50-50, you'll see somewhere I've actually gone and hunted down the correct version number and got a link to the repo and all that, the documentation. But if and then the other 50% is just me crudely just putting the names of packages I need in here. Whenever you can do this before you build the project, you can do this after a project's already built, but you're gonna have to rebuild the project so that it gets this requirements file again, which we're about to build this project. So that's the requirements file. This is for running tests, for writing tests. You have your get ignore file, which it's set up well. I never have to do anything in here. When you learn Git, you go in and you do all the things, right? And then this just has all the ignore stuff in there. So it's just really nice. Here's your pre-commit, which I'll show you that as well. I'll try to get it in this video. I think we're at 40 minutes almost, so I'm trying to go fast here. Yeah, so these are all the linters. You might have to come in here and make some adjustments. So for instance, I've had to turn a couple of things off that were just, it just gets a little nuts. Like for instance, one of these, rough, doesn't like it when you have null and blank set to true on char fields on your models. And in some situations, it's like, you gotta have that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a better way to do it. But as far as I know, there's just some situations where I need a char field, and sometimes that thing's gotta be blank. So I had to come in here and edit the hook here to get it to block a certain error code. Some error codes can't be blocked from in here. They can be blocked from the code itself with no QA markers. So when you get into pre-commit, it gets a little confusing, and it's a little annoying as well. But it's good. It's worth it. It's worth every minute because it makes good code. Read the docs YML. You've got the docs YML. Okay, this is your local YML, and this is what we'll be running. So I want to look at that real quick. And this is a Docker Compose file. We have a couple of containers. For one, we have these persistent data, these data volumes that will keep your apps. So if I initialize an application and then I go in and I just add a bunch of user data and I, maybe I have Wagtail installed and I make a bunch of pages and put in photos and content and all that stuff. If I shut down Docker without persistent volumes and then I restart it, that stuff's gone. When you've got these volumes, you can shut it down, restart it, and it'll all that data will still be there. So it's good, and we like that. And it's already set up too. All right. So it's in terms of services, we have the Django service, and this is important because we'll be calling these names. So the name of the service matters, right? We have the Django service that's on port 8000. You can find the environment variables, up there. It depends on Postgres, Redis, and Mailpit. Postgres is less important. We don't, and by the way, this is the name, but that we call. You can find the Docker file in the Docker compose production, Postgres. So you can find that there if you ever need to tweak anything. Same with Mailpit, Redis, Celery. These are all containers. Celery, Beet, Flower. That's it. But this was in production, wasn't it? No, this was local. And then, I think the last thing before we spin up the project real quick is, there's your typical manage.py file, is the production YML, which, YAML. I like to say YML, and so I try not to say it, so I just spell it, and then I feel dumb. I feel noobish, but whatever. It's basically the same, other than you got traffic in here, which is what handles your URLs, basically what handles your traffic. It's a load balancer router. It runs let's encrypt. That's nice. I'll be honest, I'm not much of a networking person myself, but I don't have to be. I'm learning a little bit as I go every day with Cookiecutter Django. You've got all of these services: Celery Worker, Celery Beet, Flower, AWS, CLI. Okay, so that's for production. Unless you deploy, you don't need to worry much about that. We're going to say don't save. Okay, so here's the trick. I chose yes to Docker, so I need Docker running, which I should have had. I think I might already have it running. I should have checked my tray here. No. Is it? It's going to be a problem. Okay, so we have Docker up. Now, in order to get this running, say Docker. Wait, first we need to cd into the project directory. So I was in this folder. I ran Cookiecutter on the repo. It sped out this folder. I am still out in the parent folder. So I need to cd into Cookiecutter, which is the folder, not, again, very confusing, but that's my project folder in Cookiecutter. All right, and then from there we can run docker compose -f for file, -f, and then the file that we're going to choose is local YML, and then we're just going to say, look, there's a couple ways we can do this. We can say build. We can say build no cache if we want it to do a raw build, without using any of the cache version. But then it's built, it's still down, it's not running, but it's built at that point. We can say up, which will, in most cases, automatically build it. But, I say it's sketchy, but it's not that sketchy. It works just fine. I like to do -- build, especially on the first one. There's no cache requirements, and once it's done, it's going to go ahead and build. And then on top of that, if we use the -d flag in any situation with up, it's going to run it detached, which means it's not going to show the logs. It frees up the terminal. You can still use the terminal, but you have it running in the background. If you shut down VS Code, it's not going to stop the containers or stop the project from running. If you're in production, you typically do this, and then you can just shut your terminal, and the website's still up. It's still running. It's no big deal. But we want to see the logs in this case. We want to watch it build. So I'm going to go ahead and make this as big as I can, and then I'm going to close the file manager. So we want the full experience here. Now, when I hit enter, it's just going to start running. It's going to spin up all of the containers there in the local YML file. It's going to build the project. It's going to run all of the things it needs to run. It's going to install all of the packages. It might even run migrations for us. We'll have to look at keep an eye out for that. Let's see. And this will take about 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'll probably start a new video for creating an app within the project. But we'll hit enter here. This error, by the way, is because I just started getting this the other day. Literally the other day, I spun up a new project to work on some HTMX stuff, and apparently the version number in YAML files is obsolete now. So I know I just shut down everything to do that, but let's scroll down here. All right, so we have we're at 9 of 9 right now, but that should be about 108. Okay, yeah, there we are. So if it's building, it's at 40 seconds, 24 of 108 steps, I guess. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna sit over here and vape for half a second. If you pay attention, you can kind of see what it's doing. It's the Python build stage, 1 of 3. It's run apt get update and run apt get install no install. I guess that's not, can't read that full command. It's at 26 of 108 now. It's at 75 seconds. Now it's running the pip will. It's installing all the requirements, which is where it would be if you added any new packages, you'd be getting them here. There's a few packages, so it takes a second. We're at 137 of 137 seconds, 29 of 108. I might fast forward this part depending on how long it takes. We'll have to see. $29 of 108. Sorry about that. Just get you started. Finance. Just committed to having it up and running today. Okay, nice. You know, it's a great time during a project build to check your email. Make sure you have work for the next day. There we go. All right, now we're at 31 of 108. This should go pretty fast now. We're in the Python run stage, 6 of 22. Dun, 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 dun. 271 seconds, 31 of 108. I thought it would go faster, but it still actually, it pulled all of the packages and then it just installed them. So I guess it downloaded them all at once. Now it's installed them all at once. It's a lot faster. We're at 48 of 112, so the steps went up. That's okay. We're at 52 now. Here we go. There we go. All right, so now it's actually creating, turning on the containers. You're going to see this. This is what it's like when it's running live. All of these containers, you have your Cookiecutter local Redis container, which that's going to be your project name, whatever you name it. That's your Redis container. It's going to give you some, you shouldn't see any errors. You'll get really good at spotting errors. Like for instance, there's a warning right there. No config file specified using the default config, which is totally fine. You shouldn't see too many errors. There's mailpit. Postgres is telling you that the database cluster will be initialized with local whatever. The default database encoding is according to, okay, that's fine. It should say it's ready to accept connection somewhere. Oh, you can, yeah, success. You can now start the database server using whatever. Warning, enable trust authentication for local. So you'll see some errors for being running locally with Celery. You got Celery beat there. Should see Django down here. Okay, so we did apply all migrations. You can see the migrations happened. And then you got Postgres again. So, and then this is what it's like. This is what happens with, uh-oh, what do we got here? I don't see the error. Django Celery beat. Huh. I wonder what that's about. Oh no. Okay, well I'm not sure exactly what that error is. I haven't seen that one before. But then it went right back into Django and was like, no, we're back into finishing the migrations. So what you're looking for, this is how you know when your pages are ready and available. So from this point, if I go to a browser, let me pull one over here. If I go to 127.0.0.1, port 8000. This is the website. This is what you get with the website, all right? And again, it's port 8000. You have a sign-in, which I haven't created a super user yet. To sign up. About, which is, this is coming out of the base.html. So back to the templates real quick, and then I'll show you how to shut this down, and then I'll move on to the next video. Go into the project folder, go into templates, go into base.html. And you can see that in the content block of the base.html file, you have a block body, and then you have our content down. Oh, that's the header right here. And you can see use this document as a way to get to quick start any new project. Every other page overwrites the block content block except for not these pages. But if I go and if I take that block, I put it in here where it extends base, and back it up a little bit, and I can say H1 home, hit save. Now because async is installed and running, if I go to home, there you go. You get the base template, and then this content block that's inside of here, which right now just has home and an H1 tag. It overwrites what was in the base template before. It just, like, if I removed this, it would be empty, because the block template, or the content block is still there in the home template now, and it's overriding the base HTML template, what was in there, which was use this document to get started. But there's nothing in it, so it's going to come up blank. You see, whereas it would, if I removed this code, it'll go back to just inheriting from the base.html. There you go. All right. So when it comes to the sign up, real quick before we let's do this. I'm gonna hit Control C because this is running in the foreground, right? It's taking over the terminal. There's no way to, to use it. Anytime you go to a page, you're gonna get all the alerts, and anytime Celery does anything, or if there's just like a check on the system, you'll see this move just randomly every once in a while. And then if you go anywhere, you'll see it move. If there's an error, you'll see it in here. So it's really good to have your logs, but it's not good if you want to use your terminal. And I know I could just open another terminal over here, but I just hit Control C to stop. Now if I say docker compose file local YML, and then if I say down, they should all already be down, but you'll see that sometimes they just kind of like linger in the background. Maybe not this time. Yeah. So even though they were already stopped, now they're removed. Another thing you can do if you're having any issues or whatever, you can say remove orphans, and it will really like, it's gonna, it won't delete all your stuff. It'll just kind of like shut everything down to a base level where when you start it back up, you'll know it's not Docker giving you problems if you're having problems. All right. So you don't have to use remove orphans, but I use it quite a bit just to be safe. If I'm having problems, I can't figure out what's going on. That's one of the things I do is I just shut it down, remove orphans, start it back up, and see if that fixed it. Sometimes it actually does. Sometimes the containers get hung up. It's interesting to experience like what happens and this and that, but just you don't always have to use it, but you can go down. So I'm gonna go up in detached mode, which is -D. I don't have to build because it's already built, right? So I just need to just to go up with it. And now it's going to do the same thing that it did before when it created them. However, waiting on them all to start. Now I have my terminal back, okay? So I can go to the website and poke around, hit refresh. We're still waiting on the applications ready. Sign. It is much faster if you don't use remove orphans to get it to go back, to turn back on, by the way. But that's because it uses a cached. Come on. What are you doing? Taking a long time, that's all. There it goes. And it'll do that when it's in detached mode. You don't know, you got no logs, right? So, okay, but you can have logs. So that's what I need to do two things here. First, I just hit up on my keyboard to get that command back, but instead of running up, I'm gonna run logs. And it dumped all the logs. So you could go that route. If instead of just running it, you could just dump the logs whenever you need them, if you need them. But it's completely up to you. So one thing I'm going to do here is probably move myself out of the way. It's not me. So that, come on. All right, it's not going to let me click. There we go. All right, move me up here. That way, you can see what I'm typing. I've got docker compose -file local YAML. I need to access the Django. I need to access the Django shell. So when you have a Django project, you can run shell on manage.py, and you can open up the shell within the Django environment to get whatever packages are installed in the project, and all of the models and whatever. Without that, you can open up a Python shell, but you can't access a project without the live server stuff. Same thing with Docker Compose. The problem with that is, how do you get there? And that kind of leads into a whole, you need to know Docker Compose a little bit, a rabbit hole, is that what they call them? But I'm telling you, it's not that complicated. So I'm in local.yml, and I want to do run -- remove, and then I need to target the container. So I could say Redis, I could say Celery, and that's just because they're named that way. It's not because that's the name of the tool. It's because they're named that in my local YAML file. So Django, Postgres. So if I need to do Postgres commands, I would say Postgres and then whatever commands, mailpit, Redis, celery worker. The terminal just crashed. Uh-oh. Let's reopen that. Okay, so whatever container I want to spin up, and this, by the way, this is Docker. Super cool Docker. It's being a little buggy. These are those containers within that project. They're all on the same network. They're all running concurrently. And we've got docs we've got logs in here in this new version of Docker. So that's pretty cool. Huh. Haha. Okay, that's really cool. That's a new. I haven't seen that before. All right, so we go local. So I want to say run and removed. Okay, so those you want to run a removed version of a container. The container we want to run is Django. Okay, so that'll put us in the container that houses our Django installation. It's not Django itself. We're not referencing Django, the programming language. We're referencing Django, the container named Django that happens to be named Django because it has the Django install in it. I know it's confusing, but we're not referencing Django here. We're referencing a container named Django, right? Once we've referenced that container, then we can run normal commands. So what would you run to get into a Python shell? You would say python manage.py shell, right? Oh, I have to go back in because it crashed. All right, we'll run that again. False start. And as you can see, the containers are now spinning up. Those are all of the dependent containers. So I ran Django, and it's dependent on Postgres, Redis, and Mailpit. Postgres, Mailpit, and Redis. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's going to take a second. Okay, so now we're in the Python shell like we'd be in any Python shell. I can say 3 + 3 = 6. I can from, you know what, it's fine. This is the Python shell, right? But we don't even need to be in here. We need that same command, docker compose -file local yml run -- remove or rm Django, the Docker container. And then from there we can run our normal commands. In this case, we want to do create super user. All right, we'll name it. We'll give it an email at email.com. Give it a password. Type it in again. Super user created successfully. That counts as the first user of the application. It's also the admin user for the application. Now that we have that, I've already got those credentials, saved in the browser for all the other projects I work on. So I can just click sign in. It's going to say verify your email address. Okay, so how do we verify our email address? Where did the email go? I don't know. Here, let's do this. We'll go to 127.0.0.1, port 8025. Our application is on 8000. Mailpit's on 8025. This is where all the emails go, right? So this is the email I need to click to verify my account. I click verify account, boom, it's confirmed. I'm gonna have to log in one more time. Now I've been redirected, like that user redirect from the user app. Under views. Sent me to user detail. This is user detail. This is user detail. If I click on my, this is the update, right? So that's gonna be this one. And this is almost useless, except for this is all just boilerplate, right? So one of the great things about this setup is that you've already got your abstract user extension, your extended user model over here, and there's nothing in it. You can add what you need to. In most cases, you'd create a dashboard or something and attach the user to it, and then the dashboard would hold all of the the extra information. But there's some things you might want to put on the user itself, and it's right here to do that. What else? Oh, and then we've got this debug toolbar here. Yeah. All right. So let's hide that. Let's go to sign out. We are signed out. So we have our user system. It was that easy. It took me about 20 times longer to talk about it than it did just to do it. It was that easy. But now that we are good, I'm gonna shut down, and we'll go on to the next tutorial here in a second. But in order to shut the servers down, there's a couple ways you can do it. The containers down. You could just come into Docker and just hit stop, because you're running in detached mode. Nothing's in the terminal. I mean, you could do that with the terminal too, but I don't know, the terminal might crash. But let's just keep it 100 and do docker compose -f for file, local YML. We need to go down. That's simple. And then shut down the containers. If we go check Docker, you can see that just disappeared. And if we go check the website, you can see that it is now dead. All right. Well, it's not working. I can't go to about or anything like that. It's just pulling up a cached version of the page. So that's it. That's how you initialize a Django Docker project. I'll get into how to create an app here in the next video, and setting up views and models and doing some background tests, depending on how long that video ends up being. We'll get to it in one of the next ones. So see you then.